from eccentricity to the global positioning of bands, artists, and, of course, the end of one of the most significant decades for music, the 60s. The only result that emerged from this would be a revolution in the field by the name of the 70s. The great stars of music found themselves on the verge of retirement, separation, or monotony, marking not only the past and the good times, but above all the evident entrance of a new generation of young people into music consumption. When the Beatles separated, when Sinatra, after a long career, needed a rest and with the glamorous song My Way premiered his departure, or when Elvis declined from the figure he once was, the music industry presented a precedent for new, experimental, and revolutionary changes in the way music was made. Some bands and artists connected with the 60s would present their best version in this decade, so much so that they would instill the mark of their figure as global stardom. With this, the transition begins, and albums like All Things Must Pass by George Harrison demonstrate to the public that one face is not the face of a band, crowning one of the greatest musical pieces in the 20th century repertoire. Songs like My Sweet Lord, Isn't It a Pity, and Wah Wah were part of the album. We also have the musical participation of The Doors with their album Indian Summer, another adept of the band's excellence before the tragic event with Morrison. The year 1971 is by far one of the best, if not the best, years for music, with complex and revolutionary albums, marking, for example, the consolidation of David Bowie with his album Hunky Dory, to this day one of the best and most important in his career. We also have great presences such as The Doors with L.A. Woman, the last collaboration with Morrison, imagined by John Lennon, and The Who with Who's Next. Given such quantity and quality that this year entailed, one would think that there would not be one that stood out above others. Well, there were not one but two albums that cemented the history of music forever, opening not only styles but also genres, moving masses, and dedicating the figure of those responsible as musical geniuses. We are talking about What's Going On by Marvin Gaye and Led Zeppelin IV by the band of the same name. Marvin Gaye, with his work, treats the genres of soul and R&B in a magnificent way, offering a great composition to give an innocuous message regarding the failures and developing the idea of themes that encompass the social condition as much as peace, injustice, love, war, and many more that moved an idea that in another way was not known how to treat, because with experiences in addictions, bankruptcy after success, and the inequality that he painfully visualized due to the social condition that was dealt with in the movements towards and with people of color, he delivered a magnum opus imposed with amazing songs like What's Going On, Save the Children, and What's Happening, Brother. Led Zeppelin IV is the popularization of hard rock, although it had already been dealt with in the previous albums Led Zeppelin 1, 2, and 3. In this one, the experience of the previous ones is exposed with the progression of their songs throughout the album, also giving way to the diversification of hard rock mixed with rock and roll. Songs that would become the most famous of their discography are found in this piece, such as Stairway to Heaven, Rock and Roll, and Black Dog. The position of the marked genres of the 70s and that characteristic sound comes as a result of technology and the opportunity of popularizing musical fondness now and increasingly not only in upper-class people capable of affording the purchase of a piano, but also now with young people and together with the hippie movement that contained music as a means of expression, is that the commercial point that was now wanted came to be said. With this, the definition of the themes of freedom and youthful rebellion, merging with the recent incorporation of the synthesizer and the guitar, positioned the genres of disco, punk, and hard rock as the predominant ones of the era. Having said the above, It is inevitable to think of these years without taking into account that unforgettable rhythm that would arrive with a previously mentioned element, which would be the synthesizer and its inclusion in the participation of the companion of the dance halls, disco music. This genre, although it has its beginnings in the mid-60s, derived from soul and rhythm and blues, manages to become popular by being a factor that we will see later, converting its vertiginousness towards authoritarianism and, in essence, a key branch for the expression of minority groups, of which people of color would have greater participation in both the producer and consumer areas, but it would not isolate other groups, as it would be key in the romanization, perhaps popularization or acceptance would be more appropriate here, of Latinos and gays. The periods after the year 1971 likewise had great records and albums, with great artists as references of the question of their style. We also take the inclusion of a certain type of bands outside the stereotype of musical group that would become popular in this decade, those with a staff characterized completely by children and teenagers, as was the Jackson 5 with the participation of a young Michael Jackson, the Osmonds, and musical youth. Some would say that fully knowing this era is knowing who was the most important artist of the period, and although this task is probably impossible and subjective, there is no doubt that the most important decade in history for musical creation and diversification had the gift of giving us artists by quantity and quality equally, since we highlight some faces that were both in presence and quality of good to represent the 70s, this without giving a judgment or opinion. After these years, we find the progression of artists. David Bowie, a clear example, with his financing and complexity, releasing 11 albums in which most of the popular and not so popular genres in the market of that time are found. With as many styles as one would believe, there are rock and roll, hard rock, glam rock, jazz, blues, and even classical orchestra, and releasing hit after hit such as Starman, Heroes, or Rebel Rebel. Bob Dylan, who in these 10 years released around 10 albums, represents a decade of reflection, combining the genres of progressive rock, the regression of folk, blues, and touches of pop, speaking of themes of social condition, encompassing freedom, self-knowledge, and civil rights. Among his most famous songs of this period are You're Gonna Make Me Lonesome When You Go, Is Your Love in Vain, and If You See Her, Say Hello. The last subject we will talk about is not one artist, but several, as we are talking about the band Pink Floyd, who, along with 7 albums, reflects society in the splendor of its daily life, extending to deal with its complexity in the labors of society. It is then that we find Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2, Money, and Pigs. As has been repeated several times throughout the video, the interpretation of the decade is of the voice against oppression, more so in those years when it was the peak of the Vietnam War. Thus, most of the great artists contain in their lyrics an opposition to everything anti-freedom. And although only 3 artists have been mentioned, this is still completely changeable, since we cannot omit the odes to music that Queen or Elton John made, and the identity that, for example, Kool and the Gang imparted, or the gleaming eccentric band from Sweden, ABBA, during the so memorable years of the 70s.